Okay, we might start. So welcome to the final day, which is the third day of the second Global Symposium on Technology Facilitated Gender-Based Violence, hosted by us here at UNFPA and with the support of the eSafety Commissioner of Australia. My name's Alexandra Robinson. I'm the Gender-Based Violence Technical Advisor with the Technical Division in UNFPA, and it's a real honour and privilege to be hosting you this morning, or afternoon, or evening. A few matters I wanted to cover before we launch into the content of the day. I would really like to thank the members of the advisory committee who have shaped the program over these 3 days, including the panels that you will listen to today. And we had representatives from CHEN, EFF, we had an independent youth rep, Mariam Job, IRC, Derechos Digitales, Digital Rights Foundation, TATL, eSafety Commissioner, Equality Now, Refuge, TEDIC, CETA, UCL Policy, Bellamente, SEED, and Digital Defenders Partnership. We've been deeply honoured to have their support in shaping the program over the last 3 days. It's really, I think, instrumental to have those voices of CSOs who have been working in this space for many, many years to help bring their work to light. As we get started, it's opportune at this moment to highlight we have 2 sections to the day. The first section is a plenary, which is broadcast to our UNFPA Events YouTube channel. And this plenary today consists of a keynote address, as well as 2 panel sessions. We then close the live stream and the plenary session, and we move out into breakout rooms for direct Q&A with the speakers. And it's at that moment that we provide everyone who is in the plenary session the opportunity to have direct conversations with each of the speakers. We will, of course, during those breakout sessions, be moderating comments to make sure that our communications remain respectful. And in registering for the Global Symposium, we've all agreed to make this a safe space, and I thank you for respecting that. So now to get started, I am honoured and privileged to welcome the eSafety Commissioner of Australia, Julie Inman-Grant, to open the final day of the TF GBV Symposium and provide a keynote address. Julie, and I recognise that it is an horrendous time of day for you in Australia, so our gratitude for having you with us today.
And you'll also be pleased to know that I have conjunctivitis, but the pink eye is not contagious online, so that's good news I'd like to start with. But thank you so much for that warm welcome, and my thanks to the UNFPA for joining eSafety and convening this really timely and important event. I think all of us participating are well aware of technology-facilitated gender-based violence, often shortened to TF GBV, but I'm going to move to an even shorter acronym, TFA, or Technology Facilitated Abuse, as we've been referring to it since 2016. And we of course know that this poses a tremendous threat to women, girls, democracies, and societies worldwide. And it's really important that we continue raising awareness of the scourge. But I think it's also understandable that many of us are starting to feel a certain fatigue with the gloom that inevitably arouses. And that's why it's been so wonderful to focus over the last 2 days on the incredible response and prevention programs and technology initiatives that are literally transforming the space. And so in keeping with that theme, I want to avoid focusing too much on the statistics and the other details that encapsulate the problem we're all too familiar with, a problem that has much deeper cultural and societal underbelly that we cannot address immediately or totally here. Instead, I'd like to share with you some of the experiences we have had at eSafety in implementing successful measures to address some of these issues, measures that I believe are broadly replicable elsewhere. Next slide, please. For those of you who aren't familiar with our work, eSafety is Australia's independent online safety regulator and educator, the first in the world. Originating in 2015 as the Children's eSafety Commissioner, our mandate has expanded significantly, and it started after children with women. Now, today, we lead efforts to combat online risk and harms for all Australians of all ages, and our model has 3 primary pillars: prevention, protection, and proactive and systemic change. Next slide, please. So, of course, prevention involves stopping online harms before they occur through education and training around digital safety. And I'll talk a little bit about our social media self-defense training for women that we're rolling out this week domestically and hope to have a package internationally for others to share in the coming weeks. Protection is our rapid response to incidents, providing support through regulatory complaint schemes to address images like adult cyber abuse and the non-consensual sharing of intimate images. These are all backed with civil penalties, so that gives us a lot more heft so that we can fine and compel takedown of both perpetrators and platforms if they fail to remove things voluntarily. Now, proactive and systemic change entails elevating the online safety practices and standards, both through our regulatory tools and through initiatives like Safety by Design. It also means identifying looming technology trends like deepfakes or immersive technologies and anticipating about 18 months to 2 years out how they might be weaponized. So having a government agency like eSafety coordinating all the federal, state, and international government engagement, I believe yields better outcomes in the Australian context, and again, it could be a model for other countries. And I firmly believe that it can be a useful proven model with results. This includes a 90% success rate in getting some of the most harmful content reported to us removed, which helps reduce the emotional and mental distress of victim survivors. Next slide, please. As we all know, online abuse manifests very differently based on gender. We all know that this abuse is intersectional, so women are vulnerable in a much broader range of contexts. Domestic violence is an obvious case in point, but another striking example is the realm of professional politics and policy. While I did say I wasn't going to focus on statistics, it is worth noting that female politicians are 27 times more likely to experience technology-facilitated abuse than their male counterparts. And as you can see here, it manifests in very different ways. So the disparity is evident even in an environment where you would expect successful women to be more empowered, literally by definition. Next slide, please. Now, many of us are speaking from lived experience, so know that misogynistic abuse uniquely includes rapes of threat, harm to one's children, and attacks around traditional maternal roles for working women. We also know this abuse is often violent and sexualized, focusing on our appearance, fertility, and perceived virtues. Its relentless nature aims to question a woman's competence, undermine her confidence, and ultimately cause them to self-censor or be silenced and leave public life altogether. And sadly, these tactics effectively deter women from participating in public discourse, limiting their access to career, educational, and economic opportunities. So beyond women in the spotlight, which we refer to as women with wits, our research has found that 1 in 3 professional women has experienced targeted misogynistic abuse in the course of their day jobs. 1 in 4 of these women have said they will not take a job promotion or opportunity if it requires them to have a more pronounced online presence. So addressing technology-facilitated gender-based violence is not merely a safety concern, but also an equality imperative. And I mention all of this because one of the things I'd like to emphasize very clearly once again is that TFA is not simply a matter of involving a perpetrator and their target. It has cascading societal impacts that can effectively silence women's voices and further entrench gender inequality. Next slide, please. Now, that's a message that eSafety's frontline workers rightly repeat. The fight is not a fair one, and the situation is definitely not your fault. But it's also important in shaping the way we think more broadly about solutions. Because aside from the individuals concerned, there are many other processes at work, some of them hidden and very opaque. For example, recommender systems aim to grab attention, but they also boost harmful narratives through powerful algorithms that reward conflict and dangerous views. Echo chambers reinforce existing beliefs, while clickbait exposes users to even more sensationalized gendered disinformation. And of course, the manosphere is a hotbed for this material. Online forums dedicated to misogyny are built on a shared goal: to regain control of the narrative by silencing women through targeted and coordinated online abuse. Next slide, please. Now, technology-facilitated gender-based violence exploits various techniques or tools such as doxing, swatting, cross-platform volumetric abuse, and multiple fake or imposter accounts. These digital weapons enable perpetrators to reach a wide audience, bypassing physical and time constraints while maintaining anonymity in the most cowardly of ways. Platforms may also provide spaces for like-minded individuals to organize and execute collective attacks. And this can come from a nation-state troll factory or be organized in the dark on Telegram. They continue to host harmful content because they aren't designed to actively eliminate it. Indeed, these platforms may even promote it because it's intrinsic to their trillion-dollar business models. So this is what we're up against. And so what is eSafety doing about this type of online abuse? As I mentioned, eSafety's model is based on our 3 Ps: prevention, protection, and proactive and systemic change. So next slide, please. Every day we work to prevent harm and empower women through free educational programs. Our Women in the Spotlight initiative helps women navigate professional online abuse, providing resources to mitigate its impact. We offer strategies to control online spaces and cope with the psychological effects of abuse. This includes working with employers so that they understand what their duty of care is, but also letting women know their rights as employees. Now, social media self-defense workshops are a critical component to this, ensuring the safe usage of platforms while maximizing the professional benefits of being online. Next slide. Now, Women in the Spotlight is part of our broader eSafety Gender and Tech program, which aims to enhance online safety and resilience. Through tailored web-based tools, counseling, legal guidance, and emotional support, we can equip women to navigate the online world securely. We also have a new grants program that dedicates $10 million over the next 5 years to support Australian NGOs in finding innovative ways to combat tech-based abuse against women and children. NGOs can apply for grants of up to $500,000 to create projects aimed at preventing this type of abuse. We have just made the first 9 grant disbursements and are so excited to see their collective and innovative impact. And this program fosters a supportive community for women to connect, share experiences, and find solidarity in overcoming online safety challenges in new and creative ways. Next slide, please. Our adult cyber abuse scheme offers protection for women when platforms or service providers fail to act. This includes instances where abuse reveals personal information, incites violence or self-harm, threatens physical harm, provokes attacks, or targets vulnerabilities like sexism or racism. The scheme allows us to assist women facing cyberstalking, doxing, and threats of violence or sexual assault. We can also target platforms or perpetrators who fail to respond to formal removal requests, and we can use basic subscriber information when people are acting anonymously to try and identify their identity for the purposes of issuing notifications. Next slide, please. Now, eSafety's image-based abuse reporting scheme targets the unauthorized sharing of intimate images or videos, regardless of initial consent. Now, these images encompass various forms, including nudity, private activities, or altered content like deepfakes. So these are real or fake imagery, both video and still images. And eSafety can direct platforms to remove such content, and as well as many other forms of harmful content. And as I said, we have a success rate of close to 90% in getting these images and videos removed. Next slide, please. Creating non-consensual deepfake images was once complex, requiring multiple images of the person being targeted and massive amounts of computing power. But accessible image generation apps that are on our phones have made it much easier and cheaper, leading to an explosion of this kind of material online. Through our image-based abuse scheme, we can ensure that such material is taken down quickly. We can also pursue perpetrators misusing generative AI to create non-consensual deepfake images, issuing removal notices, remedial directions and warnings, and initiating civil penalty proceedings. In fact, we are in court proceedings now with an Australian man who is sitting in a Queensland jail for creating deepfake porn images of prominent Australian women, but also everyday women and girls. And we hope this serves as an important deterrent. Next slide, please. Now, looking further ahead, we're establishing a new national service to help victims of technology-facilitated abuse within the context of family and domestic and sexual violence. Our technology-facilitated abuse support service will provide practical and technical guidance, counseling, and emotional support to survivors and the frontline workers assisting them. Now, our goal is to address the unique challenges of TFA within these broader contexts. And we're launching a pilot soon to assist women who feel that they're being stalked or monitored in the home, at work, or on their devices. We understand the complexity of this issue, and we're fully committed to looking at multiple ways to addressing this. And we will assess these results and share our findings to aid other countries in adopting similar models, which to our knowledge doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, TF GBV is not just about perpetrators, but it reflects the complex interplay between geopolitics and technology. And this requires the proactive engagement to address vulnerabilities up and down the stack, from big tech to big finance and everything in between. And this is how we hold them to account. Next slide, please, and almost wrapping up. Safety by design is another way we're working with industry to reduce the threat surface, and this is crucial because it ensures that platforms are understanding and assessing the risks and harm and prioritizing safety from the outset, building it in rather than bolting it on after the harm has been done. And I'm excited to announce that we will be soon releasing a gendered safety by design project, which examines every feature and design aspect to minimize the risk specifically for women and girls before launch. It will not surprise you to know that gendered safety by design is an area where we really need to see the technology industry lift its game. And that's precisely what we aim to do with all of you. Next to last slide. Again, I think it's probably been stated many times that addressing these complex phenomena requires partnerships, and it's so great to work with all of you, and particularly the UNFPA on this proposal, but also too through the Global Partnership for Action on Gender-Based Online Harassment and Abuse. Last slide, please. I guess I would say that in closing, that I'm reminded of a really important African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And as stakeholders around the world consider how to shape the future of the digital world, it is clear that we're stronger together. We have to learn from each other and continue pressing forward to protect the fundamental human rights of women and girls online. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. As ever, completely inspiring to listen to you. And yeah, there are so many different things you said that resonate, and not least the fact that we all need to come together to address the issue, to make sure that women and girls can access technology safely and use it for all the good reasons we have it. So thank you very much for being with us. And again, your leadership in paving the way for addressing the issue globally is just outstanding and phenomenal. So we're very, very pleased to have you with us today, or middle of the night for you. So thank you very much, Commissioner.
Well, thank you. We're generating momentum, and this is testament to that fact. It's really exciting to see. So let's keep up the momentum and keep up the progress.
Thank you. To moderate this panel, I would like to introduce Sherry Oyer, the Programs Officer for Women's Digital Rights, KICTANET, based in Kenya. Sherry, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you very much, Commissioner, for those wonderful insights on what you are doing. My opening remarks in considering this subject that we're discussing today is that when I think about the rate and the risks associated with technology-facilitated gender-based violence, such as self-censorship, psychological and physical harm, and sometimes death, I often wonder whether we will ever figure out how to fully combat this crisis and thereby protect women from these risks. The magnitude of these risks can easily lead all of us to catastrophize and panic on what the future holds. However, I'm also reminded of the saying that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. And case in point, the measures that the Commissioner has just touched on right now. Prevention and mitigation of risks associated with technology-facilitated gender-based violence calls for multi-stakeholder strategies, collaboration, safety by design features, education and awareness on online safety and consent, policy advocacy that centers survivors, and international collaboration. These are steps that can be built on for inclusion and protection of women and girls online. Today, we have an amazing lineup of speakers who will share about their work and insights on the mechanisms to prevent and mitigate the risks associated with technology-facilitated gender-based violence. And now it is my great pleasure to invite the first speaker, Eva Galparin, the Director of Cybersecurity, Electronic Frontier Foundation. Welcome, Eva.
Hi, my name is Eva Gelpert, and I'm the Director of Cybersecurity at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And I thought it would be a good idea to start with some principles. The idea being that there are some design principles that we could bring to the table from the very beginning in order to make sure that technical tools are more resistant to being abused in domestic abuse and harassment situations, which, as we know, disproportionately affect women. The first key design principle, well, to begin with, these design principles were first come up with by researcher Leslie Nuttall over at IBM's Watson Lab back in 2020, and I use them all the time, especially because I have people in technical roles come to me all the time saying, well, what can we do in order to make sure that our products don't end up being abused this way in the first place? The first, of course, is that you need to promote diversity on your design team. This is especially important because a diverse design team we'll think about abuse principles. We'll think about a wider variety of ways in which tools can be abused. Unfortunately, our tools are frequently designed by sort of 30-year-old white men in Santa Clara wearing hoodies, and they design for other 30-year-old white men in Santa Clara wearing hoodies with 30-year-old white men in Santa Clara wearing hoodies problems. And that leaves most of the rest of us out. So the other thing that we need to be thinking about is guaranteeing privacy and choice, which is to say that users need to be able to actively make informed decisions about their privacy settings. They need to be able to see what all of the settings are very easily. They need to be able to understand them. They need to be in simple language. They need to be easy to configure, and their presentation shouldn't try to influence the user. This includes periodic notifications for the user to review their configuration results in the data that's being shared, and ensure a diverse user base is considered when establishing these default privacy settings. It is really common when I talk to companies for them to tell me that, well, we give you the option of opting out of sharing, or we have, hidden this, 7 menus deep. And for some strange reason, people just aren't turning the option on. It's a goddamn mystery. Often companies are also in some ways really motivated to hide these settings because they rely on user sharing sort of as part of their revenue stream. So if they make it harder for you to know what they are gathering and then turning around and selling, they literally profit from it. The third principle is combating gaslighting. Gaslighting is when a person manipulates someone psychologically into doubting their memories and judgment. So if a user can remove all evidence of an action taking place, or if there never was any evidence, it could lead to someone starting to question their memory. One of the things that happens to me a lot is that survivors of abuse come to me and they say, well, I think my device has been compromised, or I think someone's been logging into my router, I think somebody's been logging into devices that I have in my home, and I ask them, well, how would you know? They say people are logging into, I think someone is logging into my account. Well, if someone is logging into, say, your Gmail account right now, there is actually a security tab that you can go to that shows you who has been logging into your account, what device they have been logging in from, what kind of operating system it's using, and when they did so. This is logging, and logging does a lot to combat gaslighting. I really wish that Internet of Things devices and indeed everything else did exactly the same thing, because that makes your Google account one of the very few things where I can actually point to a place where people should go in order to be sure whether or not someone else is illicitly logging into their account. The fourth principle that we need to keep in mind is strengthening security and data. If products aren't secure and only collecting and sharing necessary data and limiting the risk that they could be used maliciously, then you're going to get abuse. This involves thinking beyond the traditional security threat models and paying attention to the potential risks if the technology is used for abuse. For example, it's really common that many computer-based devices and services are managed by one user, even though they're used by many members of the family. And as you well know, it is extremely common in a family setting for the person who controls all of the devices in the home to be the abuser. Again, I frequently talk to survivors of abuse who tell me my home is full of devices that I didn't set up, that I don't know how to manage, that I don't have the admin password for. One sort of intuitive and easy way for better design in this area is for all of these devices to have separate users, and an easy way for family members to subscribe and unsubscribe to its services. Basically, you should know who has access to a device and to data, and you should be able to know these things at all times. It should be easy to lock someone out, and you should know for sure that they are locked out once you have, say, changed your admin password. The fifth principle is making technology more intuitive. Victims of coercive control live in complex, ever-shifting worlds. When people come to me to talk about their abuse cases, they are in a crisis. They don't have time to become experts in information security. And so it's really important that this stuff needs to be very simple. It needs to be extremely straightforward. It needs to be easy to use, and it needs to be easy to audit. So those are sort of the four principles that people should be kind of bringing to the table.
Thank you very much, Eva, for those insights on the principles. I think what has really stood up for me is the question of intimate partner violence as well, related to technology and how it is facilitated. At this point, I would love to also introduce the next speaker, Emily Springer, PhD, consultant at Techno Social Advisory LLC. Welcome, Emily.
Great. Hello. Thank you for the introduction. Happy to be here today. All right. All of you should be seeing my screen right now. Okay.
We are.
So great. Thank you. Wonderful. So I am an algorithmic literacy trainer, and I am here to sort of do a quick little deep dive in some of the ways in which I think we can be using feminist AI to mitigate technology-facilitated gender-based violence. So what you're looking at here on the screen is actually an ad campaign that was done for UN Women back in 2013. And what you're looking at covering this people's mouths, you're on the left, it says women should, and then the auto-complete being suggested is women should stay at home, women should be slaves, women should be in the kitchen. And on the right-hand side, you see women shouldn't. Auto-complete suggestions are have rights, vote, and work. And the reason why I'm starting with this is because there's an idea out there, probably not for the folks on this call, but there's an idea out there that artificial intelligence, algorithms, machine learning is objective, that it is technical and neutral. And what I really want to drive home here is that we always want to be thinking about machine learning and artificial intelligence as socio-technical. And so the ways in which we can see that social norms, chief among them, misogyny, sexism, of course, all the other isms, racism, ableism, ageism are also all in there. And so you always want to be understanding that this is a technology that is constantly re-embedding our social values. So I'm going to make 3 points today. The first is that AI can easily enable, reproduce, and amplify TF GBV. Yet without intervention, this is a technology that can actually represent inequalities to us in the form of predictions. The third thing is the great news. Humans build AI and we are in charge. So the more we can bring a feminist approach into the process, we can build AI that works for everybody. So as many of us are aware, TFGBV is all around us, seeing more and more cases each and every day. So how does AI work? What is machine learning? The idea here is that you take large amounts of data, runs through a mathematical equation, which is an algorithmic model, and that model is assessing and looking for patterns, and then it's making a prediction based on the analysis of those patterns. But really, what's the innovation of artificial intelligence here? It's this idea that models can learn from examples and don't need to be hard-coded. So they're learning from lots and lots of examples about the social world. But if you're like me, you probably said, wait, it learns from examples? The world is really unequal. So I want to make sure that we're all thinking about how AI is always operating in the context of systemic, historical, and geopolitical inequalities. And that really changes people's opportunities, experiences, and outcomes. So we often talk garbage in, garbage out. When it comes to AI, I want us to be thinking about inequalities in and inequalities out. And so now we have a technology that can take our intersectional inequalities and represent them to us as what appears to be a technical or neutral prediction or an output or an outcome. So the OECD very recently came out with a definition of an AI system, and this maps to the new EU regulation that's unfolding. So I'll walk through this quickly. On the left, you have the environment. That's the world that we all live in, and that can be physical or virtual. And in different ways, that environment is turned into data. So it's perceived into data, and then that data goes into an AI model. Now that AI model, it's working to achieve the objectives of its creator. So just as the commissioner mentioned, we have these social media algorithms. They're trying to get people to stay on. They have a reason to be promoting sort of misogynistic content. The more it keeps people on, the more people are clicking, sharing, etc. And then out of that model, there's an output, and that output influences the environment. I want to go beyond that. I want us to think about the context in the environment as representing historical and systemic oppressions. And then I want us to be really thoughtful about how data represents a single case. It might be me, it might be you, the way that we interact on social media. And then to remember that AI models are always trained on existing data. So let's take a peek at a case. So this is from Sasha Lucioni. She is an AI researcher currently at Hugging Face. And so she went ahead and put into a text-to-image, a generative AI model, a full-length photograph of a woman named Sasha, so her first name. So that's the single case. It went into a generative AI model, and out came this image of a photograph of a theoretically woman named Sasha. So you can see that Sasha here is not wearing a lot of clothes. How and why does this happen? So Sasha went and looked at a training data set to see if her image was in training data. So you can see on the top left of the added image that Sasha's face here is on a flyer for a research talk. And then there are all these other women who are barely clothed. And so someone, either the women uploading those photos, either labeled themselves as Sasha, or somebody else in the process labeled them as Sasha. So this is how that comes to happen. But so humans are in charge. Humans imagine, fund, build, design, train, test, deploy, and maintain AI systems, which means that we have some power, and I think we're forgetting that in today's world. And regulations are growing, so let's actually make sure that TF-GBV is included in that. Very quickly, I think that we can go through this process and start to ask more questions about what feminist AI may look like. So I'm going to speed through just a couple examples here. So when it comes to AI governance, we want to be thinking, what regulations will this AI system be subject to? I'll just keep going. In the context, as Eva mentioned, teams need to be sourced from the existing context. What budget and recruitment needs to be done in order to assemble a strong cross-functional and diverse team? When it comes to training data, what data exists and who does it misrepresent and represent? Within the AI model itself, what type of algorithm was selected and why was it selected? When we think about model performance for single cases, what fairness and bias metrics were actually used in testing? And last but not least, we also want to think about how those generated outputs are changing the environment. So AI won't work well for women, girls, and minoritized communities in all their intersectional experiences unless we design it to. And the good news is that with broad algorithmic literacy, we can start to do that and hold tech companies accountable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily, for that insightful, just reflecting on AI. And I think from what I get is a reflection on ourselves, that we are probably, we human beings are the weakest link at this point, and also just a reminder of how much tech-facilitated gender-based violence is also evolving with each and every innovation and each and every technological advancement. Thank you very much once again. And now it's I'll welcome Candela Yache. Candela is the founder and director, Fundadora de Belamente. Welcome. I hope I did it justice.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. I think that it's really important to open conversation of these topics. So digital literacy is increasingly recognized as a central element of the skills a person requires for school, work, and life itself. But what exactly that it means to be digital literate? Digital literacy goes beyond technical know-how. It refers to the knowledge, skills, and attitude that allow people to be both safe and empowered in an increasingly digital world. Online safety, for example, is part of it, and understanding how to protect our personal information and the importance of privacy setting on social media. Also, online behavior is super important, definitely beyond the technical know-how. It is something we really work on in Bellamente Foundation for giving tools to prevent cyberbullying, respecting others online, and maintaining healthy relationships in a digital world. Young people are digital natives in the sense that they have grown surrounded by technology. They, or actually we, have been in charge of even teaching and helping adults in their way into tech use. The thing is, we've taught ourselves. In Argentina, we have a mandatory sexual education classes that is something that we can discuss in another moment, the implementation of this mandatory sexual education. But I want to remark that they have like some topics in these classes that are about how to take care about our bodies and other bodies, the assessment of affectivity, diversity, the exercise of rights, gender perspective. But nowadays we know that there are lots of online sexual interactions, and this is not addressed in classes. No one teaches how to take care of ourselves online. We don't need only to be taught how to work or study online. We need to know how to interact with each other in respectful ways, how to care for our bodies and other bodies, what are our rights in the digital world, and how to manage emotions online. For example, giving and asking for consent is a practice that should exist both face-to-face, but also in digital ones. Teenagers all over our country have told us that this is a problematic when people add, for example, intimate content in their close friends, and they receive some comments, or they receive some images that they don't want to receive. So this kind of stuff are the one that we should, that we would not know if we try to deny young people desire to relate with each other online. Also, the way we handle our emotions need to be taken into account. It's harder to perceive that impact our words have on the others if we don't see other persons. We thought about users and not people. We don't see their faces, their reactions. It's easier for us to forget about the person and to write whatever we want, being more cruel. The fact that the things happen online does not mitigate the impact it has once on mental health, which is huge. The impact outside the screens, anxiety, depression, isolation are only a few of the symptoms people experience after suffering digital violence. Conservative approaches about sexuality over the years have tried to keep us safe by keeping us away from it, and failed. Inmediately, we firmly believe that we don't have to do the same with digital literacy. We need to understand that being digitally literate is broad. It even includes our social and sexual habits online. Sexual education classes need to consider digital environments that are not ones like it or not. Young people are meeting each other, socializing, having sexual bonds. And we stand by the fact that information is the most powerful tool to prevent and mitigate violence and take care of our mental health. That's why we've carried with UNFPA a campaign for 2 years in a row, spreading awareness and information about technology-facilitated gender-based violence between our young people audience on Instagram, the platform we mostly use, where more than 270,000 people follow us and interact with our content. I think that we need to continue with this work, to adapt our work, to listen the new social problematics and adapt our world, our work to the new technology and yes, I was listening the other panelists, and I have plenty of things that I want to add. So I hope so that then we can interact. But I'm really happy to be part of this. I'm thrilled with seeing all of you here creating strategies to approach a topic that we care about so much. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Candela. Very insightful contribution. I think the first thing that just jumps into my mind was the inclusion of young people into the conversation on digital literacy, and then the connection between personal data and tech-facilitated gender-based violence, which is usually would then put people at risk of these kinds of offenses. So thank you very much for your time and for the contribution. I want to now call upon Toby Shulraff, Principal Consultant at Toby A. Shulraff Consulting. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Sherry. And thank you to other presenters on the panel. I find, there we go, my slides have come up. Particularly since the COVID-19 pandemic, a fair number of tools have been developed around the world to attempt to meet the needs of survivors of GBV, to provide information, to help find service providers, support, and more. Unfortunately, in our urgency, and because GBV staff may not always be well-versed in technology, most of these tools do not adequately protect privacy, and in some cases may add to the risks and harms that survivors are facing. To address this problem, the UNFPA have been developing guidance on the safe and ethical use of technology. My name is Toby Shulraff. I use she, her pronouns, and I have been working at the intersection of technology and gender-based violence for over 20 years. I'm joining you all today from the Salt River Valley on the ancestral territories of Indigenous peoples, including the Acamel, Uram, Pima, and Pipash Maricopa Indian communities. I've had the absolute privilege to assist UNFPA in creating mechanisms for the implementation of this guidance, including developing an assessment tool. Next slide, please. The key considerations for safe and ethical technology are to do no harm, first and foremost, to use participatory approaches in the design of technology which integrate users and their needs and risks into the process throughout the entire design process. As Eva was saying earlier, technology needs to be designed with these both threat models, but also the needs and the priorities of the people that they're designed for. Use and accessibility. Tools must be available to people with disabilities, but to people writ large. Technology tools should not make us conform to them, but they should work easily for us. The design of technologies should include safeguarding and managing risks and an analysis of data and what the implications of the data that is collected or stored might have for survivors. It needs to, at a minimum, comply with data privacy regulations, but beyond that, we know that the privacy of survivors goes above and beyond what may be covered in simple legal structures, and it must be rooted in consent. The assessment tool that we developed has 3 versions. The first follows the guidance most closely and is intended to be used from the very outset of a project where you're designing technology to be used by or with survivors, to steer the design and development process with these considerations front and center. Recognizing that other tools are already out in the field, we have also developed a version that can be used to assess a tool that is off the shelf, meaning that it has already been produced and you're considering using it for the purposes of service provision. Perhaps this is a tool that's been offered following a hackathon or by a vendor. And the use of this version of the assessment is to mitigate any harmful or risky practices that were inadvertently embedded in the tool for all the reasons, again, that the previous speakers have highlighted. A third version of the assessment tool is a guide to the redesigning of an existing tool. So you have the opportunity to take a tool that's been around for a number of years and to strengthen its privacy and safety practices and its usability This is the version that would help there. In the next slides, we'll discuss 3 key points for teams working to develop a new technology tool. Can I have the next slide, please? One of the biggest mistakes is to ask, how can we use an app or AI or a wearable or any other kind of technology to solve gender-based violence or to provide needed services to women and girls and all their diversity? This can be called techno-solutionism. Instead, every project should begin with a problem defined by women and girls who are directly impacted by the problem that you're trying to solve. They should define the scope of it and whether or not technology is even something that could help to address that. In other words, every project should be rooted in participatory approaches. Next slide, please. A successful project that produces safe and ethical technology will have a multidisciplinary team in addition to participatory approaches. The team should include knowledge and skills in GBV, privacy, accessibility, user experience, security, and participatory and trauma-informed design. Where a team lacks a skill, consultants can be brought in. One word of caution, though. Sometimes non-technical staff can feel intimidated by the knowledge of technical experts. Remember, all kinds of expertise are needed on the team. Take time to understand and to be understood, and do not accept any answer that is thick with technical jargon. Ask for a plain language explanation. Next slide, please. This is absolutely essential. We must strengthen data privacy and security. So the team should learn more about principles of data privacy through examples like purpose limitation, data minimization, security, integrity, confidentiality, and unconditional service. Consider risk scenarios. Survivors of GBV face a number of potentially overlapping risks depending on the circumstances of their situation. There's not just a one-size-fits-all solution here. Around the world and in every country, circumstances and governments can also change. Several key scenarios that are useful to consider in order to minimize risk to survivors and maximize potential benefits are the following. A survivor or beneficiary wants to keep either the traumatic experience or seeking services private from someone in their life, family, a partner, a friend, particularly if they're sharing access to a phone or other device and technology, or it's being monitored. Or an adversarial party hacks or otherwise grants access to the data that you are storing about survivors and beneficiaries. Or identifying information about survivors and beneficiaries is accidentally leaked. Finally, another kind of scenario to consider is that management of the technology itself, the tool that you're developing, might end up being turned over to another party, including a government. All of these scenarios, in addition to those specific to the context you are working in, are essential to consider throughout the design process and can be informed by survivors and the women and girls you're working with. Last slide, please. Further resources are listed on this slide, including the guidance, as well as the proceedings from the previous symposium last year. They are available through UNFPA. Please feel free to reach out with questions, and I look forward to the breakouts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Toby, for that. One thing that also just jumps out for me is when you talk about techno-solutionism and the fact that the question of inclusion and multi-stakeholder engagement. When you speak about multi-stakeholder engagement, it is very easy sometimes to forget the women and girls who these technologies affect. And therefore, even in my country, Kenya, we are now debating on what is effective multi-stakeholder engagement. How do you include everyone, regardless of where they are from, their technical experiences? So thank you very much for that. And I think it's very important that for embedding safety solutions in the tools that are being innovated and developed as well. And of course, issues of data privacy and security, issues such as data minimization. If we have those embedded security measures, then we are able to deal with that. So thank you very much. And at this point, I'll call upon the next speaker, Jamila Sahiba, Senior Program Manager, Emerging Technologies, the Dialogue. Welcome,
Thank you.
Jamila.
Thank you so much, Sherry, for the kind introduction. Lovely to be a part of the Global Symposium on Tech-Facilitated Gender-Based Violence. I think it's a very, very relevant conversation that needs to sort of start. And now that we're living in the AI realm, I think it's very, very important to sort of look at some of the perspectives of what AI brings to the table and how can TF GBV sort of be addressed in the AI realm. So in my talk today, I'd be sort of touching upon some of the key strategies that I think should be incorporated at an ecosystem level to sort of combat TFGBV. And when I say ecosystem level, I sort of imply towards what an AI life cycle looks like, what are the key players in this AI supply chain, and how do we sort of address and ensure we mitigate TFGB at every level of this AI life cycle, right? So I'd want to start with addressing the issue more holistically and so as to create a safer and more inclusive digital space that upholds gender equality and human rights, as we all sort of come together to discuss today. So I'd sort of point towards three key stakeholders that I see can play a very, very relevant and significant part in sort of combating TFGBV in the AI realm. I'd first start off with the developers themselves, who sort of form a key component of this AI lifecycle. And I think this is where the entire discourse starts from. So while there is a lot of conversation on how AI systems need to be fair and non-discriminatory, it feels so far that this conversation sort of comes or seeps in from a point where it's a thought that comes after the development itself. And I think the tables need to sort of be shifted. We need to sort of shift gears towards ensuring that this is a conversation that we have while these systems get developed so as to have this on the table from the get-go. So towards that, I suggest that in the development phase itself, there needs to be more representation, which is gender inclusive. We need to sort of actively start working towards increasing participation of women in the technology sector, which is something which is very fragmented and limited across different parts of the world right now. We need to, towards this, I think there is need to implement targeted initiatives, mentorship programs, and creating an inclusive environment that encourages diverse representatives in building AI so as to begin with, right? Secondly, I'd suggest that at the development level, there is need to collaborate more with feminist technology experts, fostering this kind of conversation with experts in feminist technology and women rights organizations could sort of help us incorporate diverse viewpoints, and developers can thereby ensure gender responsive design of products, thereby emphasizing safety and inclusiveness in their design models. Next, there's need for design features, like dedicated design features towards safety and accessibility. So I think at the development level of AI models itself, there is need to implement design features that facilitate safe and accessible reporting options within the platform itself. This ensures that users have easy access to support mechanisms, creating an environment where instances of gender-based violence can be reported, and not just reported, also be addressed effectively. Moving on from the developer side, coming on to the deployer side, again, here there is need when we do deploy these AI systems for direct engagement by end users, there is a need to sort of build transparency reporting mechanisms. Deployers of AI need to sort of strengthen their transparency reporting. This might look like or involve detailed insights into the nature and extent of online and technology facilitated violence against women and girls, as well as actions taken in response by the platform towards that. There is need to establish codes of conduct. End users, particularly platform operators, should sort of establish, communicate, and enforce strict codes of conduct. These codes should outline acceptable behavior on their platforms and foster a community that prioritizes respect and safety. So that could be a very important aspect at the deployment level. There is also need for consistent standards for content moderation. So while we talk about what can be done, there is also need for consistency of how these standards should be developed. So towards this, I think there is need to implement, again, consistent standards that go beyond blatant forms of violence. So we need to incorporate AI-driven tools that can detect and respond to more subtle forms of online violence, considering the nuances of diverse cultural and linguistic context. There's need for digital literacy programs, which need to be implemented that specifically address TF GBV. These programs should equip end users with the skills to critically access online content, discern misinformation, and recognize signs of potential harm. On the last leg of the AI supply chain, when we come to end users, I think there's definite need to build more awareness. Towards this, I think there is need to sort of engage more with end users and educate them about the risks associated with TFGB while on their use of AI across different platforms. Now, these awareness campaigns can be disseminated across various channels, including social media, online forums, and educational institutes to sort of reach a wider audience. Through these campaigns, the aim should be to build end user awareness in their interactions with AI platforms. Further, I think there is also need for, to mobilize through the end users, there's need to sort of mobilize platform-specific guidelines. The end users should be educated and made familiar with these guidelines on appropriate content and reporting mechanisms, and as well as the end users should also take initiative in ensuring that the guidelines that have been informed to them sort of resonate with what with what has been sort of projected to them, and if not, they should sort of have a mechanism to flag it to the concerned deployer or the developer. Education should also cover the procedures, as I said, for reporting these instances of TF-GBV and seeking support from platform administrators wherever applicable. So I think through this structure of targeting different stakeholders in the AI lifecycle design, it's very, very important to drop targeted strategies towards combating TF-GBV, because AI as a technology is only going to grow and expand in the times to come, and there is need to sort of look at how that aspect could be built into the AI design to begin with, and so that we can sort of look towards preventing and mitigating tech-facilitated gender-based violence. That would be all on my intervention today, and happy to be a part of the discussion and looking forward to more questions in the breakout room. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamila. Thank you for painting that picture on the AI life cycle and where to start that conversation. And it is before it's at this point of development, the inclusion of women in that area as well. And I like the fact that you bring out the issue of the shortage of women in the AI workforce and in technology. And I think most of the conversations usually also as I'm reflecting is this workforces sometimes they have such unfavorable working conditions that women are not able to continue to work in those. So I mean, like there's a leaky pipeline in the whole workforce. So I think that's very important. Thank you very much for that. At this point, I want to also introduce Dr. Shay Brown of URITSIS and co-founder and managing director of Her Story Consulting. Welcome, Dr. Shay. Dr. Brown, sorry.
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. I just want to start off by acknowledging that I am zooming in from the lands of the Aranda people here in Mbantua, Alice Springs, and I just also want to extend my acknowledgement to elders, past, present, and to those young ones coming up as well. And I just want to extend that acknowledgement to all of you and your elders from all of the lands that you are coming from today. All right, there's my presentation. Great. So I'm here to talk to you about this beautiful little program called URITSIS, and I'm going to talk to you about it as much as I possibly can in these 7 minutes. Can we go to the next slide, please? So just to say that URITSIS is based on research. So we conducted some research on behalf of the Office of the eSafety Commissioner, who you heard from earlier today. And what we found in that research, which was conducted looking at the experiences of technology-facilitated abuse amongst Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women in regional and remote Australia, is that we found that experiences of tech-facilitated abuse are extremely common and widespread. And this is despite the fact that many of these communities are among the most isolated and remote communities in the entire world, many of which have only recently received internet access, and many of which are still without phone network coverage. So despite that, we're seeing it's quite widespread. And the vast majority of this tech-facilitated abuse was being experienced within the context of intimate partner violence and connected to something that locally and contextually we refer to as jealousy, but can be kind of described as coercive control, so a pattern of controlling behaviours. And we found that frontline services, if they existed, and in many of these places they don't exist, but if there are frontline services present, that they themselves didn't have a strong understanding of tech-facilitated abuse, what it meant and what they could do about it, and if there was any available supports, and they weren't sure about its context within the law. So this research recommended the development of localised, place-based primary prevention initiatives. And I think that's quite unusual because we're often talking about scalability, but what this research really emphasised was the importance of place-based initiatives because these contexts culturally and linguistically are so very different. Next slide, please. So from that research, you're right, cis came about. Sorry, can we go to the next slide? And this program is being run in a consortium. There's actually about 5 different organisations now, all contributing staff, time and resources because we don't have much of any of those things. And we travel to extremely remote locations to deliver this program with the aims of increasing digital literacy, particularly amongst Aboriginal women as a way of enhancing online safety and just building upon that as a protective factor. We're also trying to challenge attitudes and beliefs which dismiss or condone technology-facilitated abuse. Just that thing where people kind of say it's not a big deal. But we know it is a big deal because we know that it's linked, for example, to intimate partner homicides. And here in the Northern Territory, where I'm based, we have 7 times the national average, the rate of intimate partner homicides here, and around 3 times the national average of domestic violence-related assaults. We have amongst the highest rates of domestic family sexual violence in the world. So it's really important that we get in, that we share these messages early. And we're also raising awareness of not only to communities, but to frontline services of what it is and how to identify, support women and children who are experiencing this and to respond and to really balance this with really positive messaging around technology. Technology is not the problem. It's the behaviour, the way someone might choose to use it. So we really do talk a lot about healthy online relationships as well. Next slide. So we do 3 things, which will pop up in a moment, I'm sure. So we're aiming to empower Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities here in Central Australia with the skills and knowledge they need to identify and respond to tech-facilitated abuse. So we do in-person workshops, and in those in-person workshops, we develop print media, which we then disseminate back to those communities. And then we also have social media channels which reinforce those messages. Next slide, please. You might have to click a few times. Right. Yeah, just keep clicking through. So we work in 9 communities in Central Australia. These communities are very, very small. So some of them have 80 people, some of them have 100. Our biggest community has about 500 people. And these are very, very remote and very spread out. So it takes us quite a long time to travel. So often this program looks like us jumping in a car, driving on an unsealed road, sometimes for 15 hours or so, depending on where we're going, and then delivering these workshops, these sessions to people, sometimes outside, sometimes in the dirt. Our ethos is we will work wherever we can with whomever we can. 1 person, 30 people, we don't care. Next slide. And in those in-person workshops, with some of the pictures here, we will work with the community members to create their own messages and their own resources. That's really important because culturally and linguistically, these places are very, very different to anywhere else in Australia. Next slide, please. So what we say to people is we say, okay, what's the most important thing that you've learnt today? What's the key message that you would like to share back to your community? And they draft these posters usually or social media tiles up, and then we take them away, we get them developed, and we send them back to community so that we're constantly touching base with them. We're going in at least 3 times to deliver workshops, and then it's being reinforced through this print media coming back. So you can see through some of those on the screen, some of them are in language. The one on the right-hand side is in Yolngu Mata, for example, with messages that people understand. Next slide. And another thing that these print messages tell us is they tell us what is really resonating with people, what's sticking with people. So we see a lot about image-based abuse coming back in these things, because often the first time people have heard about this, they've seen it, but they didn't know it was illegal. Next slide. And this is just an example of what we do. So we will work with community members to draft up their design and their key message and their key understanding from that. And then we'll take it away and have it designed up and sent back. Next slide. And something that we see with these is that people have incredible ownership over this. One of our communities, for example, did a big grand reveal of some of their posters. And that's, I think, the strength of co-creating and co-producing with communities. Next slide, and we'll make that the last one. And then we make sure that that gets disseminated back out via social media as well. So using those 3 platforms, that really important in-person workshop, repeated engagement with communities, then disseminating back those locally place-based resources, and then reinforcing again on social media. And through that, trying to raise that awareness of tech-facilitated abuse, particularly amongst populations that often don't speak English, or their culture is very, very different to mainstream Australia, in ways that's really culturally safe and relevant and contextually specific. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown. Very, very wonderful insights there, and just thinking about it and just reflecting on it as well. I love the fact that you have brought in the conversation about the remote areas and issues of connectivity, last mile connection, for instance. Most of the times when you're talking about technology facilitated gender-based violence, it is very easy to forget these people, because the assumption is that they're really not affected by this anyway, because they are not connected anyway. But it is very important not to exempt these people. I think it's very wonderful work that you're doing in Australia, and reaching to also include everyone that is involved. At this point, also just the fact that you say technology is not the problem, I think this is coming out very, very well as we go on in this conversation. It's the behaviors, and therefore the need to protect women, regardless of where they come from, and the intersectional issues that affect them. Thank you very much once again. The next speaker is Chinmay SK, founder of Pachachao Project. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Chinmay. I'm the founder of the Bachao Project. It's a techno-feminist collective that's based in India. We are a group of women and non-binary persons with the goal of mitigating gender-based violence and working towards equal rights for women and LGBTQ persons and gender diverse persons, primarily in India, but also anywhere in the world. So as part of our work, we do work on prevention and mitigation of technology facilitated gender-based violence, in general, gender-based violence online, and we support communities and individuals. The way we do it is through research, trainings, and teaching. Why I say trainings and teachings separately, as we move forward. Our work is based on first-hand research, usually research done by community members or research that are done on technology platforms. And we prioritize working with people who are most affected by the technology-facilitated gender-based violence, and gender-based violence in more, but the individuals and communities who are the most affected. What is happening with them, and we tend to build without relevant understanding, relevant research, without including them in our conversation. So we try and work with these communities and individuals. It's also because not all of us have the same kind of threats and risks. I think previous speakers have also emphasized about this and talked about this, that everybody does not have the same threat or risk. Everybody has different risks when it comes to the violence they're facing, and their mitigation needs are very different. And looking at it from individual lens, from a community lens, is super important to us. And that's what we prioritize in our work. So we've shared some of the relevant research in the links in the chat. You can have a look at it. But to talk about it, we also think that research is important because we've seen that one solution doesn't work for everyone. Everybody comes from a different environment, a different limitation, a different support system. So the kind of mitigation that's necessary when you're working with individuals and people, and it is very different from one person to another. So we definitely believe in doing specific research with individuals and communities. We worked with, in the past 2 years alone, we worked with LGBTQIA communities, and specifically in that also we worked with certain communities in that. We've done generic research as well for the community needs, but we've also looked at specific communities based on requests. Like there was requests of certain trans communities in state of India. So we worked with them to understand their needs. Then there were specific individual requests. So we worked with them to understand their request. And we feel that this kind of understanding, apart from the broad level understanding, is important for us to design any kind of solutions or to build technology for safety and security. So we prioritize this kind of research. So you can see 3 things. One is building safer communities, which is a research we've done with the LGBTQI communities. There's another research that we've shared, which we did 3 years ago, which talks about marginalized women and the issues they face online. When we speak about marginalized women, we speak about marginalized women in India and the issues they faced in online civic space. So this research gives us insight into not just the women or the non-binary persons themselves, but also like the threats they face, how do they differ based on how visible they are, their location or their political situation, how much these threats differ, and how much we need to think about their needs while building technology. So that's something that we've come across in our work. Apart from that, we've also seen that to prevent and mitigate violence, there is importance to build capacity. I know the previous speakers have spoken about this. Important to build capacity both in the technology community and in the communities and individuals who face this violence. It's important to train them to be equipped when they face such a violence, or when for workplaces to be equipped to support these individuals when they face such violence. This apart from like the standards and the rules that platforms can set to prevent violence. The last thing that we've seen as help in this situation is that the technology teams are themselves trained in how the kind of technology they're building. with sensitivity and with understanding of needs, and also the importance of diversification of these teams that are building technology, help them build the relevant technology. That's what we've seen as three important things. That is research, trainings, and teaching. Teaching for the technology teams, training for the communities. Thanks, Chair. That's from me.
Thank you, Chinmay. Of course, wonderful insights and just reflecting the fact that women, girls, we are not a homogeneous group. I think that is something that is very important to always think about. And I've just, as you're speaking, I was just making an analogy in my head when you're talking about research, that research is almost like diagnosing the problem. Then when you finally understand what the pain points for each and every group is, then now you can make, you may prescribe, and the mitigation measures have to be tailored to the specific risks and threats. And I think very wonderful insights and very wonderful contributions. Thank you very much once again. I think overall, what I have been getting, some of the keywords is inclusion in developing solutions, capacity building, digital literacy. I think those are the things that have jumped out for me from every speaker. And I just want to thank all of you once again for your wonderful contributions. Back to you, Alexandra.
Thank you so much, Sherry, for dialing in from Kenya and moderating such a diverse group of people with such diverse perspectives around what prevention and mitigation means, from community settings right up to how we're managing safety by design, cybersecurity, and AI. So with many, many thanks to both you, Sherry, but also to all of our speakers, Eva, Emily, Candela, Toby, Jamila, Shay, and Chinmay. We're very grateful to have had you this morning. We will now move into the second session now with Jamila, who will be moderating this session on law and regulation, because as you know, we need enabling environments to be able to support effective programming. Jamila is the co-executive director of Derechos Digitales, and we're thrilled to have her this morning. Jamila, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alex. Hello, welcome everyone. It is my great pleasure to introduce you to this last panel of the Global Symposium on Tech-Facilitated GBV. My name is Jamila Venturini. As Alex mentioned, I'm a co-executive director at Derechos Digitales, a Latin American nonprofit organization working at the intersection of human rights and technology. And I'm joined today by an amazing group of panelists who I will soon introduce you to. But before jumping into the topic of this panel, I'd like to say that it is a privilege to count on a space dedicated to knowledge sharing on an issue that generates us so much concerns. We have heard in these 3 days several inspiring ideas and learned about incredible cases, but we have also heard and will continue to hear about challenges. And I truly believe that we will only be able to address some of them with collective thinking and collective imagination from organizations and communities coming from different sectors, backgrounds, regions, and experiences, as we have seen already today, to co-create a future that is just and free from discrimination and violence. So I'd like to start by thanking the UNFPA for opening this valuable space and convening such a diverse group of experts and perspectives. And in this symposium, we have already discussed business models for technologies, ways to respond to the TF GBV with experiences from different sectors and countries. We have learned about TF GBV Program Evaluation Framework, and today about preventing and mitigating the risks of TF GBV. This final panel, as Alex mentioned before, will address aspects of law and regulation. And when it comes to law and regulation, challenges are multiple. The impacts of poor legislation or legislation without a gender and human rights perspective can be devastating. And this is particularly due to the dual character of digital technologies and the internet as a space in which violence can occur, but also as a space for access to information, including on how to protect from violence, a space to collective organization in defense of gender justice, and a space, as we heard yesterday and today from feminist helplines, for instance, to seek for help. At Derechos Digitales, in partnership with APC, we have analyzed how some initiatives aiming to protect people against tech-facilitated GBV manifestations, for instance, through cybercrime, have also failed to offer effective protection, but also been used to further criminalize women and LGBT leaders and activists. And the silencing of those groups, as we know, be due to violence or to the disproportionate state action, can damage not only the affected individuals, but also the society as a whole. It prevents access to key information about gender justice, and it prevents access to a diversity of opinions and ideas which are key to overcome patriarchal and harmful masculinity notions that sustain TF GBV and GBV, as we have heard during the symposium. The session today will be focused on the development of rights-based law and how law and regulation can support tech-facilitated GBV programming. And we will hear about state efforts with experiences from Chile and Eastern Europe, perspectives from tech companies, and how to include gender diverse perspectives into regulatory frameworks. To start this conversation, I'd like to invite Farzaneh Badi, Head of Outreach and Engagement at Digital Trust and Safety Partnership, to tell us more about the work they developed together with the private sector and how it contributes to building a healthier digital space. Welcome, Farzaneh.
Thank you very much, Jamila. Hello, everybody, and it's an honor to join you and focus on this very important topic, as well as regulations and frameworks. We also need industry standards for our trust and safety practices. And a Digital Trust and Safety Partnership is an industry consortium that is committed to developing such industry best practices that are verified through internal and independent third-party assessments to ensure that consumers and users trust and safety when using the digital services. Now, what is this trust and safety that we go on and on about? The industry term trust and safety refers to the parts of a digital services operations that focuses on understanding and addressing the harmful content or conduct associated with that service. Before I go through some of the best practices and the commitments, it is very important to know that the commitments and the best practices that we have, they are content and conduct agnostic, meaning that they are not issue specific. However, they are designed in this way in order to provide the basic framework of trust and safety for everyone globally. Our partners, there are 13 tech companies, they provide their services globally. So the best practices and the commitments are geared towards protecting and providing trust and safety for the consumers everywhere in the world and leaving nobody behind. All the participating companies agree on 5 fundamental commitments that a digital service should make to promote a safer and more trustworthy internet. We call this a best practice framework. We regard the following to be industry best practices. First is to identify, evaluate, and adjust for content and conduct related risks in product development. We heard a lot about product development and how very important it is to have safety by design either in our regulatory frameworks or in our multi-stakeholder initiatives. So the first commitment addressed that. The best practices include abuse pattern analysis, trust and safety consultation for like a specific group or generally for the stakeholders from across the field. The other commitment is adopt explainable processes for product governance. including a team that is responsible for creating rules. What are the policies and standards? What do we have user-focused product management? In a lot of the issues that we have with digital trust and safety, tech companies should have some of these basic rules, and in order to be able to address some of the issues that we've been talking about during this session. Then we have the enforcement of operations, which of course is very important element of the commitments, because you can have all the rules and practices, but if you do not effectively enforce them, then it does not bring the optimal result. And the effectiveness testing and external communication is some of the other practices that we do. And the last one is to ensure that relevant trust and safety policies are published to the public. And we've been talking about transparency among tech companies for a long time, but how does this look like in the industry? So we need transparency reports, user notices, complaint intakes that are all a part of the transparency initiatives. So but how can you as a stakeholder use these best practices, reports, and assessments that Digital Trust and Safety Partnership publishes? These are like standardized industry processes. They are of utmost importance, and in order to assess a certain practice or a certain digital service, you can use your processes, your value-based processes, to see if these best practices are optimal, or what is the maturity level of these practices in the digital service that you are looking at. We heard today about various multi-stakeholder initiatives and principle-based approaches that we have, and they are very valuable. How can the Digital Trust and Safety Partnership, the best practices and the assessments, and be helpful to your initiative? And so you can use these best practices to understand what you need to assess. What are these companies doing or not doing? What are the maturity level of these best practices? How the level of maturity in a certain process affects your community, affects the issue that you have with the digital service. And also, how can you help with enhancing these best practices? What are the issues that because these best practices are not stagnant, as our digital governance systems are not. So how can the regulators, how can the civil society and academia have a look at what the industry is doing, and come up with solutions that are also of a global nature, so we don't have a fragmented approach across the globe. And we mentioned, there were mentions of human rights, and this is my last point, but there were mentions of human rights and other issues that they're very important to look at these best practices, to look at these frameworks and industry standards, and use the human rights impact assessments in order to see what they're lacking and how they're conflicting, and how we can actually mitigate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Farzan, for this very interesting intervention. I guess it's crucial that the industry also sets standards on best practices at the policy and design level. And I would highlight from your intervention the relevance of transparency and accountability as part of these commitments, and also the need for further multi-stakeholder conversations to inform such conversations in the future. I would like now to invite Michelle Bordechar Benoit, who is a legal and legislative advisor of the Chilean National Cybersecurity Coordination of the Ministry of Interior and Public Safety. She will tell us more from a governmental perspective about the work they have developed in building legislation with a gender perspective. Thank you so much, Michelle, and welcome.
Hello, thank you very much for having me here. I'm glad to share with you our work at the National Cybersecurity Center. Well, as Yamila mentioned, I work at the National Cybersecurity Coordination of Chile. And when this unit reopened in August 2022, after ceasing its activities for about 2 years, we had 3 specific goals. One was to assess compliance with the national cybersecurity policy for the years 2017 to 2022, to develop a new national cybersecurity policy for the 5 years coming, and to push forward the cybersecurity bill until it became a law. Sorry. So from the very beginning of our activities, the gender variable was central. This started with the decision made by our National Cybersecurity Coordinator, Daniel Alvarez, to create a team with equal participation of men and women. Currently, we have more women than men, in fact, because women need to be in the table if we want to their perspective be taken to make policies. Daniel also worked at the National Cybersecurity Policy for the years 2017 to 2022, which already incorporate a gender perspective. Therefore, one of the issues to evaluate was whether this gender perspective had been reflected in the policy's implementation during those years. As you may know, one thing is the instrument called policy or strategy, where the broad guidelines are outlined, but then specific measures and actions need to be taken, so we don't get stuck in general statement. Since one of the main lessons learned from the implementation of the 2017 National Cybersecurity Policy was that, to the extent that there are no very concrete action measures with a specific institution in charge, the objectives are not met, either because they are attempted to be met but in an inefficient way, or because in the absence of a specific institution in charge, they were not even attempted to be met. So to evaluate the implementation of the National Cybersecurity Policy and create a new policy where we could incorporate lessons learned from the evaluation of the first one, we hired a consultant specialized in technology and gender. Despite having a challenging mission, because we wanted a very, very specific recommendation, a plan of specific action measures that could be incorporated into the new National Cybersecurity Policy, she did a great job. And even if this plan that we needed to have a strong technical component from the standpoint of pure cybersecurity, as we are not a human rights agency. Although the human rights perspective is crucial for us, as we have an anthropocentric view of the cybersecurity, which I'm meaning that we understand at the end of the day, we aim to protect people and not machines. But we are not an agency of human rights, so we need to stay very technical. So that was also a challenge. So the result of this work was 3 reports. One, the results report of the assessment of progress and gaps on the inclusion of the gender approach in the National Cybersecurity Policy of the year 2017. A report on specialist diagnosis of gender perspective priorities for the new National Cybersecurity Policy, and a proposal for actions to strengthen the gender approach in the new National Cybersecurity Policy. The last of these 3 reports contain a series of specific measures that can be taken to focus on cybersecurity, which I will be more than happy to share and discuss with you during the breakout rooms. But, well, so even if I think that everything I've just shared with you may sound great, at least for us, it is, but not everything was perfect. Unfortunately, the gender perspective did not receive the same reception in the cybersecurity law, and this is due to political reasons. The national cybersecurity policy is a task of the Chilean government, whereas the cybersecurity law is the responsibility of the Congress, where we currently have a right-wing majority and opposition political party. So naturally, many of these lawmakers, men, opposed to incorporating gender perspective into the law. However, we did manage to get the cybersecurity law approved with an unanimous vote from lawmakers in both chambers of the Congress. And this means that by March or April, we should have a new cybersecurity law enacted, along with the establishment of National Cybersecurity Agency, among which responsibility is the implementation of the National Cybersecurity Policy, which for the years coming contains a gender perspective integrate across all its central axes of work. So I'm very happy to share with you that within the main task of the current National Cybersecurity Coordination, future National Cybersecurity Agency, is the creation of a specific action plan for the implementation of current cybersecurity policy, among which will obviously be incorporated the recommendations made by us gender expert, which, as I already said, I will be happy to share and discuss with you during the breakout rooms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's very interesting to hear about the relevance of diversity and equality at decision-making processes and the results they generate, be at the state or the private level. And I guess the Chile's efforts in the case that you are mentioning this direction are not only visible, but should serve as an inspiration for other countries. And I also like to highlight the very intentional way in which a gender perspective was put into the drafting of the cybersecurity policy, as this was also inspiring the sense of understanding, as you're saying, that policies like this have gender impacts that sometimes are invisible if they are treated as neutral or technical policies. So thank you again, Michelle. And now let's hear from civil society on trends and ways forward to advance a gender diverse perspective into policymaking regarding tech-facilitated gender-based violence. And to explore more about this, I will invite my dear colleague Eduardo Carrillo, co-executive director at TEDIC, to share a bit of the work they have been leading from Paraguay.
Oh, sorry, I went straight to my presentation and not turned my mic. Thank you so much. Camila, and thank you so much to the whole organization. We arrived safe and sound to this very important day and to a closure of a number of days talking about online gender-based violence. So hello to everyone. My name is Eduardo, and I am co-executive director of TEDIC. We're a civil society organization based in Paraguay that works at the intersection of human rights and technology, where we have a number of areas of interest around freedom of expression, privacy, access to knowledge, and a cut through transversal perspective on gender that reflects in all those interests. So I guess that after so many days of meeting and talking about different aspects and nuances of online gender-based violence or technology-facilitated based abuse, I am certain that this last day, I hope also, is reserved in a way to trying to identify and agree on solutions or food for thoughts of avenues of change, I guess. And I believe that a session on law and regulation, that the one we are today, is particularly fitted for trying to risk some answers to this worldwide problem that so many of us are currently addressing from different perspectives. So I would say that a first thing that is important, talking from Paraguay and from the Latin American region, is that thinking creatively in regulatory or law solutions that address violence against women is not new to our territory, because feminist movements in the region have been pushing for public agendas towards ending violence around or since the 70s. with the significant achievement of being the first region to have a convention, which is the Convention of Belém do Pará, that recognizes explicitly violence against women as a human rights violation, remarking the importance of women having the right to live free from violence, and establishing legal and educational mechanisms to eradicate violence against women. And I'll go back to this at the end of my presentation. I would say that in the last 15 years also, and through that landmark moment of the Belém do Pará Convention, Latin American countries have passed laws that integrally protect women from violence in all spheres of their lives, providing a regulatory framework to legally define a variety of forms of violence, such as domestic abuse, and even violence through digital means more recently. And this is not a minor achievement in a complicated, conservative, and patriarchal context like the one our region is characterized on. And sadly, more and more the rest of the world in these last few years. So this said, I would say that like in so many spheres of life, digitization of human society has indeed brought many challenges in guaranteeing the enjoyment of human rights in the online versus offline world, never mind so many everyday examples evidencing that differentiation is just not existent anymore. And regardless of milestone documents such as the Human Rights Council resolution affirming that the same rights that people have offline must also be protected of online, the theory from practice, or moving from theory to practice, has proven to be at the very least difficult. And I think that sort of like resonates to what Farzaneh was saying about like you can have all the regulations and all the written safeguards, but you need to find ways to enforce that. Now, I would say that the right of women to live free from violence is not exempt from such difficulty. So policymakers, human rights defenders, women journalists and political women specifically also, and other stakeholders have pushed for a more proactive intervention from the state to respond to online gender-based violence. However, and this is a big however, this approach varies from the stakeholder pushing for the intervention, and those differences in a way evidence a number of structural challenges when even trying to understand or define online gender-based violence. So TEDIC is part of and we're part of the Women's Rights Online network. So as part of that membership, we're part of a group called The Better Data, where we're exploring the issue of common ontologies on online gender-based violence and perpetrator research gaps. We are examining those ontologies and different terminologies associated with OGBV, such as online abuse, technology-facilitated abuse, digital abuse, even techno discrimination arises as a term that refers to these issues. And I would say that while these terms share specific characteristics and commonalities, distinctions emerge in the identification of groups and individuals that are targeted with OGBV, ranging from women and girls to a broader focus beyond traditional gender characterization. And here I particularly think in LGBTQI groups. And that lack of agreement in terms of who is affected by OGBV inserts itself in a worldwide conservative movement, and unfortunately more and more governments that are reluctant to even recognize the existence of or validity of certain collectives. So the convergence of various discriminatory structures in the same person seriously affect their human rights exercise, and specific regulations tackling OGBV should include this perspective to mitigate and eradicate such discrimination in a comprehensive and efficient manner and to different groups that are affected by it. Because indeed women and other vulnerable groups are disproportionately affected by gender-based, digital gender-based violence. I would think that thinking in the law and regulation theme, another significant challenge when we think in this, in an evidence-based regulation and evidence-based policy making, is that OGBV research has predominantly focused on the survivor side of things, but there's a noticeable gap in understanding perpetrators, the who and the why of the violence in the first place. And I think this gap poses challenges for survivors seeking justice and resolution, and policymakers, organizations, and even private platforms that are aiming to counter OGBV effectively and preemptively. So needless to say that this lack of clarity on terminologies affected individuals and the different intersecting realities causing this violence to exist in the first place have a direct effect in a current isolated way approach to tackling the phenomena from a regulatory and implementation standpoint. So this, we think that identifying, mapping, and even different perspectives, and particularly from a global majority focus, I will push that since I am from that region, it's particularly important in fostering a unified global approach for regulatory advocacy. And I think that such approach can contribute significantly to identifying collective and effective legislative practices and successful implementation structures, at least at the regional levels. I have just one more minute. I would say that on the other hand, and speaking in the Latin American context and from Paraguay, we're identifying also a worrying commonality, and here we find the commonality, in addressing OGBV from a mere punitive approach that ends up conflicting with freedom of expression without following very well established processes by international law, such as the triple test. I think that it is very important that whenever we're thinking in regulation, and particularly from global south context or global majority, we must avoid merely expanding the criminal code, but seek preventive and reparation measures that accompany survivors more effectively. And I think that in those preventive and particularly on the preventive side, it is crucial that we continue pushing for educational initiatives and awareness programs on preventing OGBV. I think that in the panel before that, Candela Yach was talking about a bit on digital literacy, and it resonated with me on this. And also methodologies that can ensure the measurement of success of those impacts and the need of adapting as the generations and the technology evolves through time. I would like to finish to say that within this Better Data group of the Women's Rights Online Coalition that we're a part of, our mission extends to revealing the identities of those responsible for OGBV and establishing a unified language for ontology definitions that are critical to our collective efforts against OGBV. So we would like to invite interest parties that are participating here to engage with us in a number of series we're currently hosting to address these knowledge gaps. Particularly, we will participate at the margins of the Commission on the Status of the Woman on March 14th. So either if you can join virtually or in person, we would love to find and map people who are interested in enriching these processes that we're currently hosting. So when we do the breakouts, I'm going to leave my contacts and that of the Web Foundation's gender team for you guys to directly contact us if you are interested in learning more about this process. So thank you so much, Yami.
Thank you, Eduardo. It's so important to recall the key role that social movements and civil society organizations play and have played, not only in pushing for change, but also in producing knowledge to inform responses. Let's remember that the same definition and identification of tech-facilitated GBV as an issue comes largely from civil society, and it's not surprising at all to hear how organizations like TEDIC are deeply engaged in advancing such concept and responses in that direction. And thank you also for bringing the relevance of an intersectional approach and the challenges for this in this moment as we advance regulation. And to close our panel today, I would like to invite Dr. Jasmina Durmu, Human Rights Ombudsperson of Bosnia and Herzegovina, to explore a case about the unique challenges faced in Eastern Europe and their approach to law and regulation. Please, Dr. Jasmina, welcome.
Good afternoon, good morning, depends of where we, and it is really my pleasure and my honor to speak today and to share some knowledge and experience related to law and regulation on information and communication technologies in context of gender-based violence. It is very important to look at from a perspective that so often the practice going faster than regulation. What is normally, and in global context, we have such big developments related to information communication technologies. If we are looking what was the focus of not only IT companies, but also governments, is to maintain and regulate issues related to organized crime. First of all, example, money laundering, or including also to use information communication technologies for such serious crimes. But there has not been recognized influence of ICT on human beings, and particularly that they can be a tool to violation of values as human integrity. When we are looking from perspective of Europe, we will say that there is adopted Convention on High-Tech Crime on Council of Europe. But when we analyze that tool, we can say that regulation does not provide a sufficient elements to provide full protection from violation in the sphere of gender-based violence. Now, when we are speaking, example, on body rights, how to protect integrity of individuals, it is very relevant, and definitely if somebody asks me as a lawyer, what should be next step, it is very important to provide full assessment, analyze of IT technology legislation, what should be tool for states, member states, to use in further reform of national legislation. When we are speaking on ICT violence, it is very important to say that they do threats to bodily integrity, and that is increasing globally, but also in Bosnia and Herzegovina. All forms of violence is rooted in gender inequality and discrimination of women and girls. I must say that UNFPA, not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but in whole this region of Balkans, recognize that, and during past 2 years made particular efforts to change situation. And one of those efforts is analyze of legislation and institutional frame, how to deal with that. And if we are putting in context of member states' obligations, I must yeah, thank you. Now we have slides. You can move on next slide, starting for behavior general recommendation. And if we are looking for international frame, which gives states a platform to harmonize national legislation with international legislations, we can conclude that CEDAW Convention, but also from European perspective, Istanbul Convention, are not effective tools, if we are looking only them as such, to ensure protection under national framework, or to ensure harmonization of national legislation with international standards. But we should look that CEDAW was ratified before from many states before decades, and it is logically at that time when ratification happened, this problem with the information communication technology wasn't recognized. Although the Istanbul Convention is a newly established international regional mechanism, it is also does not provide obligation of states to take action related to digital dimension of violence against women. And it was recognized very soon from Grevio monitoring mechanism for implementation of Istanbul Convention, and therefore Grevio in 2021 issued general recommendation to Article 69, saying that states are obliged, based on platforms of 4P, protection, prosecution, prevention, and coordination policies, to take action and to define a digital dimension of violence against women, and to take all actions related to those two elements to ensure really protection from that type of violation. I would like to ask the next slide. And what should be, next also, what should be obligation of state? If we are NGOs, if we are national human rights institutions, if we are coming from academia, we should advocate that states are obliged to take revision of legislation in accordance with the digital dimension of violence, using exactly Grevio General Recommendation number 1, to also to take steps to eliminate stereotypes and discriminations related to gender dimension. And it is very important to do promotion, how to use safety online space, definitely starting from school, and to also be focused on elderly generation, to be honest, because they have not, they are on the end of the professional and other careers, and they need to have additional education. It must be permanent type of education within civil servants, but also within in the public, and also to provide dissemination of information on legal support. Next slide. I would like also to say about national context. The Bosnia and Herzegovina ratified all international standards, including CEDAW, including Istanbul Convention. But at the same time, there is still problem to understand obligations related to violence in digital sphere. And in next slide, I would like to inform on current situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina that we have adopted legislations. All those are very important, but there is lack of harmonization related to definition of violation among various laws which are in place. And there is also a problem that different implementation, and a result of that, there is lack of effective protection. We had case, and I would like only mention that in August, where happened a femicide of ex-partner, but he streamed that killing of her ex-wife through Instagram. And there was serious problem for police authorities to stop that. And definitely, I would like to say that it's very important to make a strong, not supervision mechanism, but mechanism to control all those companies which maintain social networks. And I would like to conclude on the end with that what should be steps. Definitely, National Human Rights Institution, I'm one of heads of that institution, should take advocacy for change legislation, to provide harmonization of legislation with international standards, to provide a victims-oriented approach, what means that that approach must provide assessment of needs of victims and of ensure assessment of their security. I will stop here because legislation is always a big issue, and I hope that I contributed by my intervention to this discussion, and later we will continue that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jasmina, also for reinforcing the existing state's obligation to put an end to all forms of violence, and for bringing up the different challenges that remain. I believe they will resonate to other regions and other experiences. And as I said in the beginning, advancing law and regulation, as you also concluded by saying, is urgent, but is not an easy task. I would also highlight your point about the assessment of tech policies on how effective they are to protect people against gender-based violence that is tech facilitated. And I believe that's a key element of law and regulation and its challenges. So it has to do with building the governance mechanisms for implementation and oversight. To finalize this panel, I guess I'd like to say that as we put ourselves the challenge of developing law and regulation, we have to be aware, as again Dr. Jasmina highlighted, that TF GBV is deeply grounded in structural exclusion and discrimination. Tech fixes won't be enough to stop it. On the contrary, they may generate more damage. A holistic approach that also counts for providing mechanisms for meaningful and safe connectivity is necessary, as we heard in different panels in the symposium. Prevention should be a key pillar of a regulatory model, as we heard from Eduardo and also this morning from different people, including the eSafety Commissioner, Julie Inman-Brandt. And in order to advance towards a legal response, we need to depart from a human rights perspective that offers balance when interpreting the law, as Eduardo has also said, considering the dual character of technology that we mentioned before. Again, an intersectional and survival-centric approach that prevents victimization and impunity is also key for us to advance in this direction. and to keep in mind the need to include the different stakeholders involved in combating TF GBV in policy and regulatory discussions, if we want to build legislation that is sensitive to context and that responds to the actual needs and realities of survivors and their supporting groups. Well, with this, I believe we can close today's panel by thanking all the panelists for their contribution. I really look forward to continue this conversation in the breakout groups and in other spaces. And I now pass back to Alex to close this session.
Thank you so much, Camilla, for wrapping up such a complex and diverse perspective so well. So thank you very much. And also thank you to our speakers, Fazana, Michelle, Eduardo, Jasminka, and it's been a great pleasure and Eduardo, sorry, to have you with us, and I think really helping us take that deep dive on what rights-based law and policy needs to look like, and so many of the different areas of work that we need to navigate in order to make sure that policies and laws that we do support are in fact rights-based and are not weaponized in a way that subjugates women and girls accessing technology. It's been an honor and a privilege to have had to have been able to support this platform today, the symposium, and to introduce such an incredible array of speakers who have brought such depth of knowledge and expertise to the issue of TF GBV. I now would like to take this opportunity to thank all of those who are now on our YouTube live streaming channel for being with us this morning. We will now be closing that live streaming channel down while we move into the second part of the event where we enable the direct Q&A with speakers. So with that, I will be closing the YouTube live streaming channel. Thank you again for being with us.